Welcome to Safe and Sound. My name is Sergeant Dobbs, and today I'll tell you how to survive a cyber psycho attack. While out shopping, our friend Mr. Puggins suddenly hears screams and gunfire. His first instinct is to run for the nearest exit, but that would be a very bad idea. Your average cyber psycho is equipped with boosted reflexes and automatic weapons, which means outrunning one is no sure thing. So, how can Mr. Puggins stay safe? He should quickly search the area for the nearest ADU, or Automated Defense Unit, and find shelter as close as he can. All ADUs are clearly marked, so you can't miss them. The ADU will activate when the first shots are fired. Its job is to protect civilians and, if possible, neutralize the crazed attacker. Mr. Puggins should stay in cover while the ADU is active. If he's not careful, he could be the victim of friendly fire. Mr. Puggins might also be tempted to call the police, but that's both unnecessary and unwise. The ADU has already notified the authorities of the attack. But more importantly, many cyber psychos have auditory implants, which means they can hear you, even when you whisper. When the police finally arrive at the scene, Mr. Puggins should not speak to them unless spoken to, and should not make any sudden movements. NCPD officers are trained to respond to any unexpected sounds and activity in high-risk situations by using live ammunition. As with the police, if trauma team medics arrive at the scene, Mr. Puggins should not speak to them or approach them. They are only there to extract trauma team policy holders. Similarly, corporate security will only defend their own employees. All others at the scene will be treated as potential obstacles to ensuring client safety. Once the police eliminate the cyber psycho threat, leave the area as soon as possible. But remember, if the attack occurred in a store or shopping mall, you're likely entitled to a discount or voucher. Don't forget to claim yours. That's all for this episode of Safe and Sound. Stay alive out there. Welcome to Safe and Sound. My name is Sergeant Dobbs, and today I'll tell you how to survive on the streets of Night City. Our pal, Mr. Puggins, has plans to meet up with his friend, Mr. Pugberg. What should he remember before he sets out for the day? Most importantly, never leave home without a weapon. You never know when it might get you out of a tight spot. And before stepping paw outside the apartment, check the NCPD bulletin to see if any shootings have been reported and where. But, no matter what the reports say, always steer clear of Pacifica and the Northside Industrial District. These areas don't fall under NCPD jurisdiction. Mr. Puggins is now on his way to meet his friend at a bar in Little China. As it's not too far, he's decided it's safe to walk there. But it's not long before he realizes his doggone mistake. Unless absolutely necessary, you should never walk around Night City. Instead, use the NCART Metro or private services such as Combat Cab. Oh boy! Things take another rough turn for Mr. Puggins. It looks like Watson's been temporarily closed off by corporate security forces. But he's in a hurry to meet his friend, so he decides to leap over the barrier. Another mistake. Corporate forces have the right to open fire on any intruders without warning. Instead, Mr. Puggins should call his friend and agree on a new spot to meet. When choosing a new place, Mr. Puggins must make sure to suggest a location that isn't a known meeting place for gangs or other bad guys. At last, Mr. Puggins has reached his friend, Mr. Pugberg. Nice work, fellas. I sure hope they remember my advice on the way home. That's all for this episode of Safe and Sound. Stay alive out there. Welcome to Safe and Sound. My name is Sergeant Dobbs, and today I'll tell you how to live in harmony alongside the Night City Police Department. Our buddy, Mr. Puggins, is on his way to work when he notices a police cruiser flash its lights behind him. But because he's in a rush to an important meeting, Mr. Puggins decides to ignore the police. Better think twice, Mr. Puggins. Under the Safe Streets Act, the NCPD has the right to open fire on any vehicle that refuses to pull over. Let's give him another chance. This time, he promptly pulls to the side of the road and knows to turn off his engine, rest his head against the steering wheel, and place his paws behind his head. As the police officer approaches the vehicle, Mr. Puggins decides he'd like to ask why he's been stopped. Wrong again, Mr. Puggins. It's the police who ask the questions, not you. Remember, never speak or make eye contact with an NCPD officer unless told to do so. The officer tells Mr. Puggins to step out of the vehicle, but he only moves to stand next to the car. That's not gonna cut it. In this situation, you must lie down with your face to the ground and paws behind your head. If you don't do this on your own, the officer will be forced to assist you. Excellent. The officer has finished his search, and everything appears to be in order. Mr. Puggins is free to carry on. But before hitting the road, don't forget to extend a small token of your appreciation for the police officer's service. Always follow this advice to enjoy a safe and problem-free relationship with your local law enforcement. That's all for this episode of Safe and Sound. Stay alive out there. Welcome to Safe and Sound. My name is Sergeant Dobbs. Have plans to leave town? Then don't miss this episode. Poor Mr. Puggins has to make a trip outside the city. What should he know beforehand? First and foremost, never leave city limits without at least a week's supply of food, water, and chew-to canisters. Better to be safe than sorry. Second, whenever you can, share the road with someone. And make sure they're well armed, because sometimes bullets can be more valuable than water. Third, remember to check the day's weather forecast for any sandstorm warnings. And last but not least, always be sure to have a valid border pass when you reach city limits. As you can see, the Border Defense Watchtowers made Swiss cheese of our dear, innocent friend instead of the nomad outlaws trying to invade our city. Speaking of nomads, Mr. Puggins will have to keep a sharp eye out once he enters the Badlands. Out there, he won't have the brave men and women of the NCPD at his back. At the first sign of any nomad activity, Mr. Puggins should head straight back to the safety of the city, or risk becoming vulture kibble in a roadside ditch. Remember, leaving the confines of Night City is not a matter to be taken lightly. If given the chance, always travel by air. That's all for this episode of Safe and Sound. Stay alive out there. Welcome to Safe and Sound. My name is Sergeant Dobbs, and today I'll show you how to feel safe in your own home. Our loyal friend, Mr. Puggins, has just moved into a new apartment. What should he keep in mind? Starting with the basics, he should make sure that he has the latest NCPD certified armored doors and blinds. Don't let your prized possessions fall into the paws of petty thieves. But in the event any criminals do get inside your home, it's always smart to be prepared. That's why Mr. Puggins keeps a weapon in every room, always within arm's reach. And for you folks who consider no price too high for your safety, consider installing your own home turret system to take care of even the nastiest intruders. If you prefer the personal touch, hire a private security guard from a reputable corporation. It appears Mr. Puggins learned the hard way that any old gun for hire could shoot you in the back at the drop of a hat. Also, it goes without saying, a home surveillance system is essential hardware to keep an eye out for suspicious activity. And, of course, Mr. Puggins cannot forget the security of his local micronet. You wouldn't want to give a nefarious netrunner access to your washing machine, would you? Last but not least, invest in a Kevlar vest. With an added layer of protection available at all times, Mr. Puggins no longer fears the occasional stray. Bullet, that is. Now, with everything in place, Mr. Puggins can finally sit back and relax. After all, there's no place like home. That's all for this episode of Safe and Sound. Stay alive out there.